Morning, all.
Hey, James. Good morning, James.
Hi, James.
Morning.
How was everybody today?
Hanging
nice-
in.
Cold Tuesday.
Sunny.
But the sun is shining.
Right.
Beautiful.
I'm glad you're all optimistic. My entire family was diagnosed with COVID last week, and my 3-year-old is out of daycare all week. So
Oh, no. Oh, James.
apologies in advance if I am cranky and slow on the uptake.
How's everybody
Everybody
doing?
okay?
Yeah, she had like 24-hour COVID and then was running around the house. For us, we were fully boosted, so it was a cold. But first time I was sick with anything in like 2 years because we've been living under a rock. So
Yep.
James, do you know how you got it or where you got it? Or God, I'm so sorry.
not sure.
Mhm. C'est la vie, right?
Yep. All right, I don't see anybody else in the waiting room, and we are probably going to be running a kind of tight conversation today as it is. So I'm going to jump in, and hopefully as others join, they can catch up. So we wanted to set, we being SRPC, wanted to set the majority of today's conversation around our annual update for our comprehensive economic development strategy. Both SRPC and REDC are designated by US EDA as economic development districts. The SEDS, as we call it for shorthand, is the core economic development plan for each of our organizations that sort of plays to that federal designation. And there are rules that EDA sets out for us for what's supposed to be included, how we pull it together, that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I did not stop recording this morning, so it should already be going. So if it's okay, I'm going to run through and use a slide deck to sort of guide our conversation a little bit. Since SRPC has been facilitating this group, it really sort of grew out of our existing strategy committee, and then obviously expanded beyond our normal geography. But in order to sort of avoid asking several of you for double volunteering time, it really helps us to be able to use these conversations for some of our planning needs. So without further ado, a quick overview on the update process and timeline. SRPC is usually on a timeline where we adopt our final plan in June. And internally, staff have looked at setting ourselves some deadlines as we go to move towards that. So we anticipate probably 4 or 5 meetings with all of you.
I'm sorry, I'm on my call. What's that? That's okay.
Whether it's an entire agenda or a partial agenda, where we might touch on a few different things as we go. The first thing, since we're doing a 1-year update, last year we completely overhauled the vision, the goal setting, things like that. This year we're really looking at, and in the subsequent years, what's changed from the year before? What progress have we made towards implementation things we set for ourselves? What new things have we learned about the the situation as it relates to the themes and stuff that we discussed in the plan, and what progress are we making on the projects that all of our partners may have going on. So the first step for that, the first step that we envision for that is we're hoping today to crowdsource some data from all of you that can help jumpstart our research. We have staff that's going to be digging into the various thematic stuff and what new has happened, what more have we learned about the effects of the pandemic on these issues. But we would love to hear your thoughts and ideas. And then at future meetings, we could maybe check in on that progress and how it's going, give some of you some previews of our conclusions as we pull those together, and then also workshopping implementation actions and prioritizing some of those actions, similar to how we did over the course of last fall and winter, for things that we envisioned being able to tackle from an implementation standpoint through the CEDAR funds or through other aspects of this collaboration. A separate part of this process is project solicitation. One of the key aspects of the SEDS is a priority project list. That is not only things that we, SRPC or REDC, are hoping to implement, but also a lot of municipal or regional nonprofit stakeholder partner projects that align with our SEDS goals, are working on the same issues, and that we hope to support. I know Jen Kimball from REDC has already sent out project solicitation emails for their process. A few of you in Rockingham County are sort of in a weird double zone. Nottingham, Northwood, and Newmarket are SRPC communities for the Planning Commission, but technically fall under REDC's SEDS. If any of you have questions about who can help you with project solicitation and getting all that done, the short answer is both of us, because we talk to each other. So let us, either Teresa or Jen Kimball or myself, know if you have questions about how to get those forms to the right place. Everybody in Stratford County or in Carroll County, you're in our EDD.
You want to hang out and watch?
And you can work directly with me or whatever other staff member is going to be reaching out. I'm only able to see like 4 of you at a time, but I can definitely hear some noise. So would folks mind muting themselves until we get to some of the discussion stuff? So that's where we're headed over the next couple months. Today's objectives, again, we just want to take the temperature from all of you. What have you seen? What publications are you aware of? What data are you using to track some of these issues, so that we can dig in a little further and hopefully pull some of these things together comprehensively. Our key guiding questions are basically what has changed since approximately May of 2021 when we tied a bow on our research last year. And that could either be new things that we've learned about the impacts of the pandemic going back to 2020, or things that have changed since then as we've gone through a little bit of the economic recovery and COVID response. And then are there things that you, your community, your organization are aware of, whether those are projects, case studies, or related initiatives, that we could either talk about as some qualitative illustrations of some of these issues, or that either would be potentially interested in being priority projects, and or something we can learn from or use as a case study when talking about these themes. We have 9 specific themes, but then we also have a few other overarching principles that we didn't really talk about separately. We sort of consider these to be interrelated to everything else that we're doing. those being equity and environmental justice, resiliency, and partnership and collaboration. In the past, we've talked about some of these alongside the other themes, and it didn't really make sense in the same way. These feel like they're on a higher level that connect to really everything that we try to do. So there's some things that we can talk about. Resiliency in particular, we're going to be playing up in this version of the SEDS because of the CARES Act funding that we've received. EDA would like us to put together some sort of resiliency plan for the region. We anticipate that our approach to that is going to be more along the lines of writing up the things that we've been able to do with that CARES Act assistance as a toolkit and some lessons learned, so that we can have a record of those going forward. But we can certainly also tie in a variety of other activities that we do, including some things on the environmental side, hazard mitigation plans, climate adaptation, that sort of thing. Okay, enough of me talking. So as I said, we have 9 themes. A lot of them are highly interrelated, and we're not particularly concerned with finding the exact line between where, for example, economic growth ends and specific business operations begin. There may be some resources or data that you're aware of that we would use in both discussions. But we have grouped these into 3 slides to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room rather than try and hold each conversation on each theme to about 5 minutes. So I think our goal is for the next 3 slides to take about 15 minutes apiece. And again, sort of crowdsource your thoughts into where we can be taking this research and what we can be looking into to inform our discussion. So to begin with, the first 3 that we've grouped together are economic growth, workforce and education, and business operations. Economic growth we're thinking about as sort of big picture assessment of the economy, a lot of the traditional business starts, job creation, job retention sort of things. Workforce education is thinking about things from the worker perspective. How do we connect people to quality jobs, connect them to the training programs that can help them to get those employment opportunities. A little bit of the sort of needs of the workforce, and certainly I think discussion of the growing power that workers have in the current economic climate are probably all going to live under this chapter. Business operations is something that we added in this current 5-year SEDS that we hadn't really thought about before. But there we're really going for how have businesses had to be flexible, whether it's a shift to remote work, thinking about growing needs for cybersecurity, more of that. How do we structure a resilient business that can respond to changing economic conditions and challenges? So initial thoughts, ideas for I guess how you're doing, how your work has been relates to these themes, changes you've seen over the last year.
I can throw out some points of discussion. First of all, James, you talked about COVID, and now this is a 5-year plan. So
Yep.
when you talk about COVID, when we discuss COVID, is that the underlying theme of this, or is it more of a true 5-year vision?
I think it is let's put it this way. The reason that we were doing the plan was not COVID. But when we did the plan, happened to align with the strongest impacts of COVID-19 on our economy. So much so that we were actually supposed to be wrapping up the plan in the spring and summer of 2020. And we basically tore up what we had and scrapped the rest of the project for that spring because we anticipated significant economic changes as a result of the pandemic. So it is not a COVID response plan, but where our prior plan was most heavily impacted by the fallout of the Great Recession and the housing market crash, this edition is heavily influenced by the COVID pandemic. And our 5-year plan was essentially structured with each of these, looking specifically at what were the economic conditions we were seeing prior to COVID. To the greatest extent we can tell, how has COVID changed what those conditions were? And then last year, we tried a little bit of what's the outlook as we continue to recover from COVID. I think with the successive updates to that plan, we're mostly going to be furthering discussion and refining discussion of the latter of those three, and continuing to think about, if COVID and other economic conditions, sort of created the environment that we were in when we started, how have we continued to progress as it relates to each of these issues moving forward? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I mean, it's an integral part of it, of course, because COVID's been such a big issue for 2 years, and I think it's going to be an underlying issue. I think as we hopefully go from the pandemic stage to the endemic stage of this, it'll still be an underlying condition around all businesses and economic development. To me, economic growth, these three themes are very much interrelated, and I think that was the purpose of putting them on the screen right here. As true with everything, these three themes flow with the economy, right? So the economy is strong right now, strong hiring, inflation is present, and there are forces at work to try to tamp all that down. So we don't know where the economy is going to be in 1 to 3, certainly in 5 years, because that's how the economy works, basically. So, I think being primed for, I think one of the overriding themes around this should also be being prepared for whatever comes our way. And I think there was certainly a lack of preparation around COVID, and I think we've learned a tremendous amount around that. So whether economic growth continues, and whether workforce and whether the workforce crisis continues is really a function of the economy. But having all of these three themes interplay with each other are important, and being resilient, I think, is an overriding thing.
Yep. Yeah, Todd?
Hi, everybody. Todd Selleck from Durham. I had a few different thoughts in a number of different strands. So I guess one is, with the pandemic has really pushed people to telework, working from home. And I think it would be good to really think through what that means for the Seacoast. Some people argue that, office space will never be the same because everyone's going to be working at home. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I imagine it'll be somewhere in between, that we'll see more people working from home for certain portions of the week. But I think a lot of folks will still need an office environment to get to, if nothing else, to escape from their family and kids. So what does this mean for office space in our downtown built environments? Is additional office space needed or not? Another area is I think the green economy, what does that mean for New Hampshire? And I was reading an interesting article about Ford Motor Company. And for them, the green economy means a lot more moving toward automation because electric vehicles, for example, have many, many fewer parts. Fewer parts mean you need fewer people on the assembly line. So as things go green, it may mean that there'll be fewer jobs, or the jobs that are being created are jobs that require a higher level of technical proficiency. So on that note, I would encourage us to think about how do we help our workforce in the Seacoast and the region in the Stratford SEDS area retool and be ready for that. You know, they may lose a job and need to get additional skills. Where do they go to get those skills? Or they may be a young person who's not a traditional college-bound individual who wants to do a liberal arts degree. There may be financial constraints. So how do we get them a 2-year degree program, but allow them in doing so to have those skills to really enter the workforce and to have the workforce present to attract companies to locate here. Another topic is EV infrastructure. It's a real problem. And I think if I think electric vehicles are a thing of the future. And I think the most innovative people are going to want to have those kind of vehicles. And if we want to attract innovative companies and innovative investors, we need to have the built infrastructure in place to allow them to thrive here, or else they're going to go somewhere else. So how do we ramp that up? I love the concept of business clusters. It's this whole economy of scale concept. I think that's really powerful. So where do we want those business clusters to take place? And I think we're at a detriment in New Hampshire because we're so locally focused. Each town is scrapping for every tax dollar we can get. So we all want to attract that business to ourselves. And we're not thinking strategically, regionally about where's the best place for development. And conversely, where's the best place for farms? And I would say in open space, agriculture, I think, might be a really viable area for the future for this region of New Hampshire to be competitive in. So how do we position ourselves for agriculture? Is that a viable market? Could that be something that is environmentally friendly as well? You know, so a positive thing. Another topic is housing. I think we really struggle with affordable housing, workforce housing, all types of housing that's affordable for somebody who's not quite affluent or retired. And so how do we solve that problem? And are there ways in which communities can sort of, or as a region, we think through where we want this housing to take place? Because ideally you sort of want housing to be developed in proximity to where there are jobs, so the folks don't have to travel a really long way to get to their job. So how do we think about that in a strategic manner? And on this topic of how do people get to their jobs, I think transportation is really important. You know, we just opened up the Spalding corridor, so now all of a sudden you're not getting bogged down in a 30 to 40 minute commute, waiting to get over the big bridge, either going to Portsmouth or coming back from Portsmouth. And that has really opened up a number of the communities on this side of the river, Newmarket, Durham, Dover, Rochester, Somersworth, to new pressure for development. So what does that mean to us? But I would think not only about sort of cars, but buses, mass transit. And is there a way we can do better with mass transit? Because we've got people who've tried hard, they've done their best, but mass transit really stinks in New Hampshire. We just don't have it down. So how do we ramp that up? And I would encourage we think really a little differently. I mean, UNH has the largest mass transit system in New Hampshire, right here in Durham. Coast operates as well. Both organizations struggle with funding. Is there a way to marry the two? Is that a potential opportunity for us? Not sure that's the answer. I'm not proposing that per se, but how do we think about mass transit in ways that are really workable? And again, I would also think in terms of transit about the train, the Downeaster. I mean, what a great boon for our regions, Exeter, Durham, Dover, we've got the train coming through. You can travel to Boston, going south. You can go all the way to Brunswick, going north. That's fabulous. And so how do we really, how do we market that? Let me just see. I'm on a roll here, so I'll try to, the estuary, we have the Great Bay and the Hampton Seabrook estuaries. These are wonderful resources that we should do much more to promote, to come here, to live amongst the estuaries, to see them as you're commuting, that beauty as you're traveling through the area, and all of the economic impact that has for the region. So how do we work with organizations like PREP, the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership, to really work together to improve the quality of water there, to protect it, and to market it effectively? I think Warren raised a great topic, resiliency of the Seacoast. So as we know, going into the future, climate change is going to mean more storms, more frequent storms, higher winds, flooding, sea level rise. And so the more our communities can be prepared for that, the fewer disruptions there'll be in this context to economic activity. And businesses want to locate in places where there are not disruptions. So I think the more resilient we can be, that's good for business, I would say. I mentioned agriculture. I guess the last thing is this education. We just can't compete unless we've got good schools and a well-educated workforce. So I'd encourage us to think about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd. I think there's definitely a lot of overlap with what you said, and I probably should have done this at the beginning. I'm going to run through the other two slides real quick so you can see where we're headed, and then I want to put a pin in the next two slides and circle back and focus on this one and take them one at a time. We also discuss explicitly housing, childcare, and age friendliness of our communities. Housing and childcare in particular as sort of things that are frequently barriers to workforce in this context. There are obviously a lot of other social and ethical reasons to focus on those issues, but within the context of economic development, we're really thinking about the affordability and availability of housing to support a workforce. Ditto childcare. I think most of the education level of thing we're thinking about under workforce and education back here, but childcare is a way of supporting parents of school-age children or younger children, and how to navigate that issue again as it relates to an available workforce. Age friendliness is going a little bit beyond that to think about investment in our communities and making them communities that are accessible for economic activity, whether it's working, employment, entrepreneurship, or even simply shopping, going out to eat, participating in daily civic life for people of all ages, and how do we accommodate that? And I think that's something that planning commissions and regional organizations are starting to put a lot more focus on in recent years, especially in the Northeast due to our aging populations. And then the final slide, we've grouped infrastructure, community vibrancy, and mobility and accessibility. So that covers transportation, but we wanted to expand it a little bit again, because transportation is frequently so auto-centric. We wanted a little bit broader language to make it clear. We also mean biking, we also mean walking, we also mean ADA accessibility, and tying directly into community vibrancy. The way that accessibility, that way that how you experience your communities, how you get around, it makes you feel about them, makes you experience them, and ties into some of those other ways that you manifest your economic activity. And then obviously infrastructure being investments in the roads, the bridges, the water, sewer, that would support all other kinds of investment, economic growth, etc. So that's where we're going. So to sort of circle back, I guess what we're really we're looking for some help in terms of some of the, either things that you're experiencing in your own community, we might be able to dig into a little bit more, whether it's on a testimonial side, a data side that you might either have or might be aware of, things that we can call out or, look further into for citations, thinking about, what is the 2022 snapshot of each of these issues look like? Robin, I think you are next.
Thanks, James, and everyone. And let me share, I agree with all the comments. I think so well said. And I don't have a whole lot to offer with this, James, but I felt compelled to at least share with you that for us in Somersworth, when you go to the economic growth category, just know that for us in Somersworth, not knowing how it is in the rest of the region, business growth and expansion is very different than it has been for me in my experience in the past, in that we're having, as you know, an onslaught of new businesses coming to the town, but it is not business growth and it's not expansion of existing businesses the way that it's been in the past. It's brand new businesses from outside the area that are bringing in very sophisticated companies. I can't even explain the pace to you. I think I've mentioned before, we closed out last year with 23 new businesses, and we are working right now with approximately a dozen who are in process, but they're all new to the area. So my sign maker might be in Connecticut. My corporate headquarters might be in Boston. There are a couple from Northern New Hampshire. But so just to share with you, because for me personally, I've never thought about it this way before. I've always thought about business, the traditional thinking of business growth and traditional expansion, and not really considered in this whole idea of this bombardment or this dropping in of brand new businesses that are entering into at least Somersworth. And again, I don't know if it's unique to us or the entire area, but just for you to have in your head as you're developing this and articulating it in a mapped out way for your applications, your partners and stakeholders. And
so
Dover's experiencing, I believe, I'm sorry, James, Dover's experiencing the exact same kind of thing. It's very different from my experience.
So to make sure I understand, you're saying you're seeing an increase not in entrepreneurship necessarily, but in out of state or at least out of Seacoast businesses looking to either relocate or open new locations here as a more significant percentage of your inquiries and people looking to fill space than you've seen in the past.
I would say, and again, I shouldn't say anything because I don't have it in front of me, but in my memory of the 23 new businesses of last year, I would say 22 of them were new businesses that came either from, and even Maine as well. And this year is starting out that way too. This isn't the whole traditional of 1980s, an existing business expanding and growing and looking at new ways. This is new businesses discovering the Seacoast from outside the area. And so when you talk economic growth, I don't know if that is implied in business growth and expansion, but what we're experiencing is new businesses entering into the Somersworth and the Seacoast market and believing that this community positions for them.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the sort of thing we're looking for. If the goal is we would like more successful businesses that employ more people, this is pointing to how that might be happening right now. And that's really good information to have. Sean?
Thanks, James. I'm just curious with those new businesses for Robin or in Dover as well. My concern is, are they looking for a turnkey workforce? Are they bringing new workforce folks in? And kind of curious what the complexion of the work is. Is it people who have to show up to make things or serve customers, or is it people who can work from anywhere, and obviously that's a different type of employee.
So I can answer that a little bit, Sean. We've had businesses that have reached out to us that are actually, some of them are actually bringing their employees with them. So they're coming as far as Connecticut, New York. That's what we're seeing a lot of. And I know that some of them are relocating their employees up here. So they're not only bringing a whole business with them, they're bringing their best employees as well.
And my experience is exactly the same, especially the key anchor employees. This whole issue from those new businesses that are operating, I'm not really hearing a lot about the need for workforce, but also positioned so closely to UNH and the Seacoast being a young community. It could exist. I'm with Reed 100%. I'm not hearing about this.
So Reed, Robin, or others that may have experienced this, are you, I guess my question for that would be then, if they're bringing all of, or a lot of the same employees with them, why are they looking to move? Especially if it's like a Connecticut to
return on investment, expansion of revenue.
So I'm hearing also a lot of quality of life stuff. New Hampshire has a better quality of life than say New York does. So that's the part of the reason that I'm hearing that they're moving up here. And they have there's a mass influx of 30 somethings for whatever reason that are moving to New Hampshire. They like the mountains, they like the seacoast, they like the area.
So it sounds like those businesses are seeing, okay, people are tending to move to these rural areas, are liking these areas. We're going to move our business with our people before we lose the people and have to replace them where we're at.
Exactly.
Okay. Natalie?
I was just going to ask the same thing that you just asked, and I don't know if you Reed or Robin have heard about why they're moving, but you answered that with quality of life and
mine do not talk to me about quality of life. Most of them are coming from lovely areas, although the Seacoast, what I hear about is geographic proximity with a high investment proposition, that this product or service is needed in this area, that they believe that they can either compete or excel. And then again, I do hear very much in passing the whole idea of the proximity to UNH and Great Bay Community College, but the whole Seacoast more broadly is dominated by young, well-educated professional people. And in these people's heads, they consider Boston as part of the Seacoast in ways that I've not heard people talk about before. But to me, and what I hear, it's all about expanding, building revenue through investment by expansion.
And I'm also hearing that there's more opportunities here for expansion. Robin's right about that.
Yeah. That's
so we have the space, we have the room for them to grow. That's what I'm also hearing as well.
In a smaller, potentially smaller, intimate environment. But again, mine, I don't know if yours is the same for you, Reed. It's generally from the New England area. They're familiar with Northern New England. They like the culture. They like the proximity to Boston and Portland. A couple have talked a lot about proximity to Canada as well. They have a very positive perspective of the Seacoast, and they also feel that the economy is so strong that whatever product or service they're providing, they can sell it and they will have a high return on that investment.
I'm seeing a lot of people from cities. So for whatever reason, yeah, Dover's getting a lot of people from New York.
Yeah, and I've seen much of the same thing. So if you draw a radius around here and go down to the Philly area, and sort of hug the Seacoast, not a circle, but sort of hug the Seacoast, go within 50 miles. There are a tremendous amount of people moving from Philly, Jersey, New York, and all of New England up here. It is primarily because of quality of life and business opportunities. This reminds me of the great migration out of cities during the 70s, which I was a part of. And then also after 9/11, I mean, there were a lot of people who needed to get out of New York in 9/11. We've experienced trauma in this country, and trauma creates a reaction. And I think that's what this is. I also want to talk about some other experiences that I've had with growth. We've got new businesses that are starting up in the Seacoast that are sort of growing organically. They're going to at some point make a tremendous impact, but it's a relatively slow incubation phase. Some of this is high tech, some of this are consumer products, some of it is education. So those are businesses that we need to be prepared for down the road relative to workforce training. We're also seeing, as baby boomers retire, we're seeing planning and actual business transition, whether that's to somebody internally within a family or within a company, or externally putting the company out to market. And any kind of business transition creates a business change in that business model, even if it's a subtle business change. I also am seeing significant amount of business growth within the region. So I'm a manufacturer. I really like this region. I am leasing right now. We've got a lot of, Washington Mills and the Kachiko Mills and all the mills throughout the Seacoast is a great incubation space to prove concept. And there are a significant amount of those that are actually looking to build and grow their brand and grow their product and hire more workers. I'm working with about three of those right now who want to grow within the Seacoast. And I just want to mention one more thing while I have the floor here. There's no mention, if we go to community vibrancy, we talked a lot about natural spaces and the connection of green spaces, and that's not mentioned anywhere here. And I think we spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, I think for that one, the short version of our discussion in the plan is that there are many ways that communities can be vibrant, and acknowledging within SRPC's region for sure that different communities emphasize different aspects of their vibrancy. So we do have downtown mill communities. We also have some fairly rural places for whom vibrancy is, have we conserved our land? Have we connected trails? And probably most communities value both types of vibrancy to certain extents, one way or the other. So I don't know that I hope it wasn't entirely lost, at least in what we wrote last year, but I can certainly see how that may not be quite shining through in the way we've structured this right now. Sean?
Thanks, James. Just to build on this conversation, which is really great, kind of soaking it all in. But in terms of the workforce and education and the incumbent population, right? I think as we've all talked about, the labor shortage is not going to go away anytime soon. So it's great to hear that companies are bringing people with them when they come here, because that would just exacerbate the problem. But
it's great to hear on this slide, not on the next one.
Okay, right. So just to go back to the original question, what has changed since May of 2021? And just to reiterate for anybody new on the call, the labor shortage has gotten worse. And I'll just speak from an education standpoint. Our community college enrollment has not come back. So we're feeling education in general, enrollments are down across the country, but certainly we're feeling it here for this group. And so I think what you're going to see is more of this shift towards shorter programs, skills-based, competency-based training programs, as well as academic programs. But that's going to be a big shift for the community college system across New Hampshire. And it's definitely the drum that I've been beating here at Great Bay for this region, and will continue to beat even when I leave. I think to Todd's point, there are going to be new skills, and we are going to have to promote those skills and help people make transitions if we want to have any impact on increasing our labor pool, and then showing people the opportunity that comes with it. So, thanks.
Now, Sean, quick follow-up question on that. So there was a lot said and written in a lot of places about, in 2020 during the pandemic, into 2021, universities are doing their alternate thing, they're hybrid, they're online. Students don't want to make the investment in a four-year degree under that sort of alternate experience. If they want to go to college, they want to go to college. They want to have the full experience. And yet, so in my head, this sort of logical step is that community colleges might be comparatively better positioned if students are more likely to go to them for the one-off class, for the online program, that four-year universities might be more severely impacted by that mindset than the community college. And you talking about your enrollment declining made me wonder if I was wrong about that.
No, I guess just without oversimplifying it, to me, you really have two different segments. The group that wants to go away and have a four-year campus experience is not necessarily saying, do I want that or community college, right? We're kind of serving some different groups. So we have caught some of the one-offs, some of the folks who wanted to not interrupt their four-year degree, but didn't want to go back to a campus or didn't want to be 100% online, for that cost. But if you look at the bulk of the community college student enrollment, it's working adults. It's people who are already committed to being in this community. And the problem with the pandemic is it was so disruptive that going back to classes just dropped too far down the line when they're economically impacted or caring for family members or dealing with COVID, right? So it's been just out of whack, and it's really, we didn't foresee it coming. But again, to go back to the question, what's changed since May of 2021? We have not seen the bounce back, and because people are still disrupted in their lives, never mind their economy and their education. So, but I feel like you're going to see a shift to that. I think higher ed in general is getting that message. And I think I can speak for the community college system and Great Bay. We absolutely have. Now the issue is we still need people, right? The labor to come back and get these higher level skills, to come back and get these higher level jobs. So, it goes back to the subgroup we had talking about marketing to employers to encourage that and to invest, right, in their employees. So.
All right, so I'm going to jump to Robin or Mikhail and then Robin, and then I want to move on to the next slide. But this is a great conversation. If there are other comments that you have related to this, feel free to drop them into the chat, send us a link, send me an email after this. We would love to hear from you, Mikhail.
Sure. Just to Sean
Mikhail, you're breaking up really badly.
Of a community college and okay.
Mikhail, I'm sorry, your connection wasn't great. Robin, why don't you go ahead and jump in and we'll see if we can
Fix that. Yeah.
fix that. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Just real quick, kind of a sidebar thought as it pertains to workforce and education. We often talk about the employees and the employers for their specific personal education in this subject matter. And again, this is my experience in Somersworth. For me, the subject of workforce and education is less about that and more about their children. So, and what I'm specifically thinking of is, and I bet you Reed it finds this too. What I'm specifically thinking of, for example, is Route 108 and the expansion of the Wentworth Douglas healthcare system. Those young professionals, those young doctors that they're recruiting into those businesses and who are moving here, choose to move here because they can put their kids in the public schools and believe their kids will have a great quality education. So when we talk about education, in my head, it is now, after this experience, it's much broader than just the employees or the employers. It's about where do those employees want to live? Who do they, yes, I knew you had to experience it too, Reed. Where do they want to live? Where can they have a quality of life that will attract them because their entire family unit will be positive? And in my experience, since day one in this job, it's about the Somersworth public school system, the proximity to UNH and the proximity to Great Bay, not for them, but the confidence that they have a good education system for their children.
So it's about a fair amount of the overlap between the educational system and some of these issues. So getting into the childcare, the age friendliness, can we accommodate the whole family that may or may not be following some of these workers? So I want to turn the page a little bit. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I know we've talked a lot about some of these things. Housing, for one example, I'm sure we're going to be drawing very heavily on all of the separate work and conversations that we're having around the housing needs assessments, including some of the conversations we had, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I think. So, I think we've talked a fair amount about housing recently, but if people have quick thoughts, feel free to add them. But then also the childcare issue, getting to some of the issues that Sean talked about all of the aspects of people's lives that have been disrupted and challenged. Thoughts on some of these issues? Robin?
I just threw out there, for whatever it's worth, for Somersworth, no one's ever mentioned to me a childcare issue. Our childcare centers have all stayed open. One of them is a very large franchise. It's also located in Dover in the McConnell Zone on Route 108. For us, this has not been an issue at all. None of them have closed. They've been very conscientious. In fact, one of the larger ones actually is expanding right now.
Warren?
I think there's an issue around affordable childcare. I don't think there's availability of childcare. Thankfully, there's been enough support for daycares that they've been able to make it through COVID. It's the affordability of childcare when parents have to spend, 25 to 30% or even more on daycare. That's just not sustainable, and therefore, 4 million workers dropped out of the workforce nationally over a sustained period of a number of months, primarily women, because they're the primary childcare people and families. So I think it's a problem. I don't see, without some governmental intervention, that's going to go away.
Well, I also think, Robin, I'll certainly acknowledge the point that the childcare system, since the initial shutdown, once they sort of figured out what's the deal with that, has largely stayed open, but it's not the same for parents with young kids. It's less predictable because where in the past, Miriam has a fever, she just needs to be out until she's fever free. Now Miriam has a fever, turns into I need to get her COVID tested. It may or may not be the right type of test. I think the way that it was reliable and predictable 2 years ago, it is not necessarily reliable and predictable in the same ways currently. And I think that's a struggle that has been written about nationally, but seems to be a lot of individual workers and families trying to sort of navigate that themselves in a lot of cases. Reed?
Yeah, I think the childcare issue actually ties into the working remote issue, because I've noticed, and I don't know if anybody else has, the amount of children that pop in and out of some of these Zoom meetings because the parents are able to keep the child at home while they're working. I think that has a huge impact as well on even some of these childcare centers. Robin, I heard what you said about that childcare center. My daughter actually happens to run a room there, and they are seeing, so James is right in that regard, they're seeing some issues when a child has a sniffle and they can't show up, and it puts a huge burden on the families, especially the families who rely on the hourly wages. So that's been a huge concern. Some of these childcare payments, and Warren's right about this, some of them can be as much as a rent payment every month, an extra rent payment. So it's a huge impact. The childcare issue is definitely significant and ties into other themes.
Yeah, and just sort of what we're experiencing this week, Miriam tested positive for COVID last Tuesday. The CDC recommendations for, and even her pediatrician's recommendation for, all right, she needs to be fully isolated for 5 days and then can theoretically finish the isolation in public with a well-fitting mask. Daycare, who experiences 3-year-olds all day, every day, has said, you know what, there is no way that we can get our 3-year-olds to keep a well-fitting KN95 on at all times. She needs to be out the full 10 days. And that's a completely reasonable reaction from them, in my opinion, but it is also sort of an additional, we're essentially losing half of this month of daycare without any change in our bill for daycare. And that's a reality that, some people may not be able to weather. Other thoughts on this one?
Just want to jump in and say that there's some information in the chat if you haven't seen it. There was a large group that met yesterday for the first of 3 meetings. It's a statewide group with a lot of different stakeholders, with the goal to put together a proposal that will go to the gopher specifically around childcare, affordability of childcare. And so I put a link in the chat to the recording for yesterday's meeting and the slide deck. And this is through the Early Learning Network. And if you're interested, you can connect with them to receive the calendar invite for the next 2 meetings.
Thanks, Jenny. That's great. And I think Teresa Pinto might have mentioned that initiative as it was sort of forming. Do you know to what extent? I think something that we're interested in improving this go round is a little bit of the data or information about how to talk about this issue and analyze this issue. Do you know is that something else that they are working on with that group?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sounds like a great set of people to connect with then. Thank you.
Absolutely. They're working very quickly. Michael just posted in the chat, the recommendations need to go to the commissioner by March 4th. So it's a quick turnaround.
Okay, I see that we're at 9:58, so I'm going to make the executive decision to switch back to this one. We've had a few comments related to infrastructure, vibrancy, and transportation, mobility, accessibility along the way, but other final thoughts, comments that you want to get on the record before we go?
Yeah, can I just say one thing? The lens and perspectives, we didn't talk about it all. Maybe that's for next time, or maybe we're not going to talk about that, but they're equity and environmental justice, resiliency and partnership and collaboration. I think that's all really good. very positive. I just want to mention tomorrow the SBDC will announce an equity and inclusion program that we have put together, and we've hired somebody to manage that program. So it's a DEI program, diversity, equity, and inclusion, around particular communities that we're going to serve. The prime community in the Seacoast is Somersworth because of their large Indonesian population. And we've been working closely with the ICC, and they're a growing organization. They're having a lot of influence in Somersworth, as Robin knows. And there are other pockets we'll be helping, Nashua, Concord, and Manchester. But as far as the Seacoast goes, we are going to bring the best practices around diversity and inclusion for the Somersworth community and any other community that we choose, that where we can create a partnership.
Great. Sounds like a great program to follow. Other final thoughts? All right, so then let me just say thank you. I know we saw a few new faces on the call today. We made a bit of a push to some of our municipalities who we don't see a whole lot of on this to be here for this conversation. So if any of you are interested in attending more regularly and getting on a regular list for these calls, they happen every week. You don't have to come to all of them, but we send an agenda out every week. You're welcome to take a look and see if you're interested in showing up. So if you want to be on that mailing list, reach out to me or Natalie, and we will take care of that for you. And with that, thank you, everybody, especially to those of you who aren't in our region, but who still stuck around to make this a great conversation. And we will see you next week.